She was making $14.25 an hour. He controlled 3 hospital networks, 2 waterfront development projects, and a city councillor who stopped returning calls whenever his name came up in conversation. When he walked into the Lakeview General Emergency Triage Bay on a Tuesday night in February and told Wren Callahan, who was in the middle of placing an IV line, that she needed to stop what she was doing and come find his father immediately, she didn't look up. She finished the IV line. She capped it carefully. She said to the patient, an elderly man named Gordon who smelled like pipe tobacco and had a blood pressure reading that concerned her, "You're doing great, Gordon. I'll be back in 3 minutes." Then she turned around. "Your father is in Bay 4, she said. "The team is with him. You need to wait outside." The man staring at her was 43 years old, broad-shouldered in a charcoal overcoat that still had snow on the shoulders, with dark eyes and the specific kind of jaw that belonged to men who had spent their entire lives having people step aside when they walked into a room. He had not expected to be told to wait outside. She could see that from the way the muscle in his cheek moved. "I've been waiting outside for 40 minutes, he said. "I'd like an update on my father's condition. The attending physician will come to the family waiting area as soon as there's something to tell you." Wren was already moving toward Gordon's chart. "Right now, the best thing you can do for your father is let us work. Do you know who I am?" She looked at him then, directly, without the particular softness that people deployed when they were nervous about what came next. "I know you're the family member of a patient," she said. "That's who everyone is in here. I need you to go back to the waiting area, please." He left. He didn't say anything else. Margaret Osey, the charge nurse who had been watching from the station, came over the moment the bay doors swung shut. "Wren," she said quietly. "I know. That was Callum Sterling." Wren wrote something on Gordon's chart. "I know who it is, Margaret. His father is a patient in Bay 4 with a suspected cardiac event and a surgical team working on him. His father's last name is also Sterling." "I know." She set down the pen. "It doesn't change anything I just said." Margaret looked at her for a moment with the expression of someone who admired a particular kind of courage and was simultaneously terrified on its behalf. Then she went back to the station. Wren Callahan was 29 years old. She had grown up in Sudbury, the kind of northern Ontario city that people from Toronto described as up north, as though it were another country, which in some ways it was. She had a nursing degree from Cambrian College and 3 years of emergency experience at Lakeview General in downtown Toronto that had aged her in the specific way that ER work aged people. Not in the face, exactly, but somewhere behind the eyes. She had moved to Toronto because her younger brother Daniel needed a specialist. Daniel was 24 and had been living with a progressive spinal condition since he was 16. The kind that didn't kill you on a schedule but liked to revise your expectations of what normal would look like from now on. His appointments were at Toronto Western. His physiotherapy was on Bloor Street. His medications, the ones that actually helped, that the provincial formulary covered only partially, cost $480 a month after reimbursement. Wren's rent on the bachelor apartment on Dundas Street West was $910. Her transit pass was $156. Her phone was $40 because she had found the absolute floor of what a smartphone plan in this country would cost, and she lived on it. She did not have a gym membership. She walked to work when the weather allowed, which in February in Toronto it did not. So she took the streetcar and told herself spring was coming. She had a plan. She had always had a plan. The plan was to work the ER for 2 more years, accumulate enough savings to move Daniel into a place with an elevator. His current apartment did not have one, which was its own ongoing problem, and eventually, transition into a nurse practitioner program so that she could do more of what she actually wanted to do, which was make decisions rather than just execute them. The plan required everything to go right. It usually didn't, but she kept making it anyway. Callum Sterling did not go to the family waiting area. She found this out 40 minutes later when the attending Dr. Pham came to find her specifically to say that the patient's son was asking to speak with the triage nurse who had spoken to him earlier. "He's very calm about it," Dr. Pham said, which was not reassuring in the way he seemed to intend. "His father, stable, blockage. They're going to schedule the stent for tomorrow morning once he's rested." Dr. Pham paused. "He seems reasonable, the son. He just asked very specifically for you." She found Callum Sterling standing near the family consultation room, not sitting. He had removed the overcoat. Underneath it, he was wearing a dark sweater and the kind of composed expression that people wore when they had processed an acute fear and were now rearranging themselves back into their usual shape. "How is he?" Wren said. "Stable." They explained about the stent. He paused. "Thank you for asking." She waited. "I came to apologize," he said. "I was not appropriate earlier. You were doing your job and I interrupted you." Ren had received approximately 4 apologies in 3 years of ER nursing from people who had behaved the way he had behaved. She recognized this one as the kind that meant something, which made it unusual. "You were scared," she said. He looked at her for a moment. "Yes, it happens. It's fine. It's not, actually." He said it the way someone says a factual thing, without particular weight. "I don't allow myself to behave that way in other contexts. I shouldn't have allowed it here." Ren looked at him. She had spent 3 years reading people in the worst moments of their lives, and she had developed a reasonably accurate internal calibration for who was genuine and who was performing. Callum Sterling was not performing. "Your father is going to be all right," she said. "That's what matters tonight." He nodded slowly. Then he said, "Can I ask you something?" She should have said she was needed back on the floor. She had 4 patients. Gordon's BP still needed watching. She said, "What? You knew who I was before, when you sent me to the waiting area." "Yes, and it didn't change anything." "Why would it?" He was quiet for a moment. It was not the silence of someone assembling a response. It was the silence of someone who had just heard something they needed time to process because they didn't hear it often. "It usually does," he said. She looked at him evenly. "Then you've been spending time in the wrong rooms, Mr. Sterling." She went back to the floor. The next morning, before her shift ended, a woman named Paulette from the administrative office came to find her at the nursing station with an expression that suggested she was either delivering very good news or very complicated news, and wasn't sure which it was herself. "There's a letter," Paulette said. "From Sterling Development's foundation." Ren set down her coffee. The letter was 1 page, professionally formatted, and informed her that the Harlan Sterling Family Foundation, named, she would later learn, for the man currently in Bay 4, was pleased to announce an endowment to Lakeview General's Nursing Education Fund, designated specifically for ER nursing staff pursuing advanced certification. The attached addendum listed Ren Callahan by name as the inaugural recipient of a professional development bursary in the amount of $6,000. She sat with the letter for a long time. Then she found the hospital's administrative contact number for Sterling Development and called it. The woman who answered was efficient and polished. Ren told her she was calling to decline the bursary. There was a pause. The woman said she would pass the message along. She sounded mildly shocked, which Ren thought was fair. He called her directly 2 days later. She didn't know how he'd gotten her number, and she told him so, which was not a comfortable conversation opener but was the honest one. "I asked the hospital's public relations department," he said. "It took some navigation. That's not how patient privacy works. Your number is technically listed in the staff directory, which is not patient information." A pause. "I apologize if it felt intrusive. I should have considered that more carefully before calling." She was on her lunch break, sitting on a bench outside the hospital entrance in 11-degree February air, because the cafeteria was loud and she needed 15 minutes of quiet. She pulled her scarf tighter. "Why are you calling, Mr. Sterling?" "Because you declined the bursary." "I did. Can I ask why?" She watched a taxi pull up to the emergency entrance, watched the doors open. "Because I don't know what it is," she said. "You watched me do my job for 4 minutes. You don't know anything about me. I'm not comfortable accepting $6,000 from someone who doesn't know anything about me. The bursary wasn't connected to knowing you. It was connected to the Foundation's existing mandate around nursing education. You added my name to it the morning after I sent you to a waiting room." A silence. "Then yes. So it's connected." "Yes," he said again, "it's connected." She hadn't expected him to admit that. Most people, in her experience, would have defended the technicality. "I'm not trying to buy anything," he said, "or smooth anything over. I watched you do your job under pressure in a way that I found—" He paused. "I don't have a better word than impressive. I understand if that's uncomfortable." "It's not uncomfortable," Ren said. "But I'm not interested in being a charity project. I didn't. What did you offer it as?" The silence this time was different, longer. "I don't know," he said finally. "An impulse. A poorly considered one, apparently." She almost laughed. "At least you know that." She heard him exhale. It was a real sound. Not composed, not measured. Just a person breathing. "My father is being discharged this afternoon," he said. "He wanted me to thank the triage nurse who kept things calm when I wasn't. He doesn't know I behaved badly. I didn't tell him. How is he?" "Good." Annoyed about the diet restrictions. Arguing with the cardiologist about whether 12-year Scotch counts as a food group. He paused. "He's going to be fine?" "Good," she said. "That's the best news you can leave with." "Yes." Another pause. "I'm sorry for calling without asking. I won't do it again without permission." She looked at the hospital doors for a moment. "You can call," she said. She did not know why she said it. She said it anyway, "if you want to." She didn't hear from him for 11 days. She told herself she hadn't been counting. She had obviously been counting. He called on a Thursday in the evening, while she was helping Daniel with his exercises in the living room of Daniel's apartment on Ossington, the one without the elevator that required him to negotiate 14 stairs every time he left, which the physiotherapist said he should be doing every other day and which cost him 30 minutes of effort each time. She stepped into the kitchen to take the call. "I'm sorry to call in the evening," Callum said. "Is this a bad time?" She watched Daniel through the doorway, counting reps. "No," she said. "It's fine. I was thinking about what you said. In the hospital. About spending time in the wrong rooms. I say a lot of things," she said. "Comes with the job. This one stayed with me." A pause. "I've spent the past 2 weeks being aware of how many people around me agree with everything I say. That sounds exhausting. It is actually." He said it with a dryness that surprised her. "I thought you should know your observation had impact, even if you delivered it as a passing comment." She leaned against the kitchen counter. Daniel had stopped counting reps and was looking at her with the expression younger brothers deploy when they suspect something interesting is happening and intend to investigate at a later time. "How's your father settling in?" she said. "He's impossible. He's already back at the office part-time despite explicit instructions not to be. He's 71 years old and he has the stubbornness of someone who has never once in his life been told what to do." A pause. "I have no idea where he gets it." This time she did laugh. The call lasted 37 minutes. She didn't mean for it to. At the end of it, Daniel said, "Who was that?" And she said a family member of a former patient, which was technically true and which Daniel clearly did not believe for 1 second. "He made you laugh 3 times, Daniel said. "Real ones. I laugh at things, not on the phone," Daniel said. "Not like that." She went home. 3 weeks after the call, she said yes to dinner. She told herself it was because she'd had a difficult week. 2 losses in 4 days, which didn't get easier the way people said it would. And she wanted an evening that required her to think about something other than shifts and medication costs, and whether Daniel's next appointment had been booked. She told Daniel she was having dinner with a colleague, which was not a lie she was proud of, and which Daniel immediately identified as a lie, because Daniel was inconveniently perceptive. "Is it the phone person?" he said. "Please mind your own life, Daniel." He grinned. He had their mother's face, her dark eyes, and the way one corner of his mouth lifted first when he found something funny. She missed their mother with the particular ache that never quite left, the one she'd carried since their mother died 4 years ago. Ovarian cancer, 14 months from diagnosis to end, and Wren had been in her 2nd year of nursing school and had known enough by then to understand exactly what each stage meant, which was its own particular grief. The restaurant was called Sidecar, and it was on King Street West, the kind of place that was warm inside, in a way that February made you appreciate completely. Callum was already there. He stood when she came in. He was in a dark jacket, no tie, and he looked, she thought, like someone who spent most of their life being looked at and had not entirely figured out what to do with the parts of themselves that didn't want to be. "You came," he said. "I said I would. People say things," he said. "They don't always follow through." She sat down. "I follow through." The dinner was 3 hours. She ate halibut with a sauce she couldn't identify but intended to think about for several days afterward. She drank 1 glass of white wine and told herself she was being careful, which was true, and also that she wanted to remember everything clearly, which was also true. She told him about Sudbury. She told him about the nursing program, about the winter she'd worked 2 jobs to cover tuition, about arriving in Toronto with a single duffel bag and a list of Daniel's specialist appointments, and the specific sensation of being in a city that didn't know you yet. She did not mean to tell him about Daniel. It came out during a conversation about why she hadn't left Toronto despite finding it overwhelming in ways she found difficult to articulate. Once she started, it was hard to stop. She told him about the elevator problem, the medication gap, the physiotherapy schedule, the way Daniel never complained, which was somehow worse than if he had. Callum listened. He didn't offer solutions. He didn't reach for his phone to call someone. He listened the way that you listened when you understood that listening was itself the thing that was needed. "Do you ever get tired?" he asked. When she finished, she considered being diplomatic. She decided against it. "Every day," she said. "But tired and done are different things." He looked at her for a moment. "How do you keep them separate?" "I think about the version of myself who isn't doing this," she said, "and I don't like her a long moment." "My company builds things," he said finally. "Condos, mainly, and waterfront mixed use. I'm very good at it. I know exactly what I'm doing when I walk into a room with an architect or a city planner or a banker." He looked at the table. "I have been considerably less good at knowing what I'm doing in rooms that involve people who need something from me that isn't a transaction. Your father's room at the hospital," she said. Any room with my father? He paused. He had the first episode in November. I didn't know. He didn't tell me until it happened again in February. He was protecting me from worrying, he said. Something moved across his face. He spent 40 years protecting me from worrying. I keep trying to figure out how to tell him that the protection is the worrying. Tell him that, Ren said. Exactly that way. He looked at her. The exact words, she said. Not a conversation around it. Just those words. He was silent for a moment. You give very direct advice. It's a professional habit. She picked up her wine glass. People in distress don't need more distress. They need clarity. And you think I'm in distress, she considered. I think you're a man who spent 40 years being very efficient, and recently found himself in rooms where efficiency doesn't help, and hasn't figured out what replaces it yet. He stared at her. That's the most accurate thing anyone has said to me in a long time. It's just what I see, I know. A pause. That's what's unusual about it. The call came on a Sunday morning, 3 weeks after dinner, while Ren was on shift. It wasn't from Callum. It was from a number she didn't recognize. And when she answered it on her break, the voice that came through was a woman's. Measured, precise, with the kind of calm that belonged to people who had learned to separate themselves from the information they were delivering. Is this Ren Callahan? Speaking. My name is Diane Okoro. I'm a journalist with The Globe. I'm writing a piece on Sterling Development's waterfront project, the Portview contract specifically, and I've been reviewing the municipal approval process. I came across your name. Ren went still. I'm sorry. There are some irregularities in the timeline of the Portview approvals. One of the councillor's offices has been cooperative with documentation. Your name appears in a record of a meeting that took place in September at Lakeview General's fundraising committee. Callum Sterling was also present. I wanted to reach out before the piece runs. I don't sit on any fundraising committee, Ren said. A pause. You're listed as an attendee. Then the list is wrong. She kept her voice level. I've never attended any meeting connected to Sterling Development or the Portview project. I believe you, Diane Okoro said, and she sounded like she meant it. That's actually why I called. I wanted you to know your name is in this documentation before it becomes public. You may want to get ahead of it. Ren thanked her. She hung up. She stood in the break room for a moment with the phone in her hand and the very precise sensation of a floor she had thought was solid becoming something less certain. She did not call Callum that night. She sat in her apartment on Dundas Street, and she opened her laptop and she read, The Portview Development Project. 1,200 units of mixed-income housing on the eastern waterfront, approved through an accelerated municipal process 18 months ago. 3 city councillors on the approvals committee. One of them, a man named Gerald Ashworth, had recently retired from city council and immediately joined the board of a holding company with Sterling Development as a majority stakeholder. This was technically legal. It happened more often than people knew. It was the kind of thing that took a specific kind of determination to untangle. She found a profile of Callum in Report on Business from 2 years ago. He was quoted extensively about affordable housing and responsible development and the importance of community consultation. He sounded, in the article, like someone who believed what he was saying. She closed the laptop. She thought about Daniel's apartment, the 14 stairs, the elevator problem that had no solution because rent in Toronto did not allow for solutions, only adaptations. She thought about what Callum had said over dinner. I'm very good at it. I know exactly what I'm doing. She thought about the $6,000 bursary she had declined. She called him the next morning. He answered on the first ring, which she noticed. I need to ask you something directly, she said, and I need you to answer the same way. All right, the Portview approvals. Gerald Ashworth. Was the process clean? The silence lasted 4 seconds. She counted. No, he said. She absorbed this. How not clean? There were conversations that shouldn't have happened before the vote. Ashworth was given information about the board position prior to approvals being finalized. It wasn't explicit. It didn't involve money directly. But it was an arrangement. A mutual understanding. That's a conflict of interest. Yes, and you knew about it. Another silence. My legal team structured it. I signed off on the process without asking enough questions about how the timeline moved so quickly. A pause. That's not an excuse. I knew enough to have had for a moment. My name is in a document connected to this, she said. A meeting record I was never at. A sharp silence. What? She told him about Diane Okoro. She told him what the journalist had said. She heard something in his voice go very still and then very carefully controlled. I'll find out where that record came from, he said. I'm not asking you to fix it, she said. I'm asking you to be honest with me about what I'm standing next to. You're not standing next to anything you did, he said, and I'll make sure your name is cleared of any connection to this. I will do that regardless of anything else. I'm not asking about my name, she said. I'm asking about you. Silence. What are you going to do? She said. He was quiet for a long time. Not the silence of someone choosing words carefully. The silence of someone who was actually thinking. I've been in conversations with my legal team and with a governance consultant for the past 6 months about how to restructure the approvals process internally. He said finally, there's a framework for voluntary disclosure to the Municipal Integrity Commissioner. It's significant. It implicates people who have been with the company for years. My legal team has been advising against it. What does your governance consultant say? She says it's the only version of this that ends in something I can live with. Then you know what to do. Knowing and doing, he said, are different problems. They are, Ren said. But you're the only one who can close the gap. She heard him exhale. Can I? He stopped. Started again. Can I call you tonight? I'd like to keep talking to you if that's all right. She thought about the ER. She thought about Gordon and his pipe tobacco and his blood pressure. She thought about the specific relief she'd felt when she'd watched Dr. Pham give Callum the update about his father. The way a fraction of the rigidity had gone out of Callum's shoulders. Just a fraction, just enough to see. Yes, she said. Call me tonight. She met his father 6 weeks later, not by arrangement, but by accident. She was coming out of a pharmacy on Bloor Street when a car stopped at the curb, and an older man opened the passenger door and said, You're Ren, aren't you? I recognized you. Come say hello. Harlan Sterling was 71 years old, compactly built with white hair and the direct brown eyes his son had inherited and the specific manner of someone who had spent decades in rooms where decisions were made and had never once stopped finding it interesting. He was holding a bag of prescription medications with the resigned expression of someone who had accepted, without grace, that this was his life now. You sent my son to the waiting room, Harlan said. He needed to be there, Ren said. Harlan looked at her for a moment. Then he laughed, and it was a full sound, the laugh of someone who found things genuinely funny rather than performing amusement. He told me, he said. He said you didn't move an inch. He studied her with an attention that reminded her strongly of Callum. He also told me you gave back the bursary. It wasn't mine to take under those circumstances. He said you said that too. Harlan shook his head, not disapprovingly. My son has been surrounded his entire career by people who take everything offered and ask for more. It appears you've given him something to think about. He's given himself something to think about, Ren said. I just asked a few questions. Harlan smiled. That, he said, is exactly what he needs someone to do. The voluntary disclosure happened in March. It was filed by Sterling Development's legal team in cooperation with the governance consultant, a woman named Sandra Adeyemi, whose reputation, Ren would come to understand, was built on doing exactly this kind of thing, not making problems disappear, but making them resolvable. Gerald Ashworth resigned from the holding company board the following week. 2 other council members who had been involved in the informal conversations were formally cautioned. Sterling Development paid a substantial compliance penalty. The Portview project continued, but with an independent community oversight committee that had not existed before. Callum called her the night the disclosure was filed. It's done, he said. She was in Daniel's apartment. Daniel had, 3 weeks earlier, been approved for a transfer to a subsidized unit in a building on Bathurst Street, with an elevator and a wider doorway and a physiotherapy clinic 2 blocks east. The approval had come through the city's accessible housing priority list, which Ren had spent 4 months navigating, and it had nothing to do with Callum Sterling, which was the only version of it she would have accepted. She had told Callum this. He had said, I know, and had not argued. How do you feel, she asked. Like I've just handed someone a bill for everything I've been charging to a tab I didn't know I was running. A pause. Lighter, actually. Which I didn't expect. That's what honest costs, she said. And what it pays. He was quiet for a moment. I'd like to see you, he said. Not as a phone call. In person, I know, she said. I'd like that too. She had spent the past 2 months thinking about this. About what it meant to be adjacent to someone who was, in the most factual sense, complicated. Whose world ran at a frequency entirely different from her own. Loud and pressurized and full of rooms she didn't know the language of. She had also spent 2 months noticing what it felt like to be talked to honestly, to have someone hear her and not offer a solution, to laugh at something unexpected, to be asked, not by someone who needed something, but by someone who simply wanted to know. She thought about Daniel's new apartment, with the elevator and the wider doorways. She thought about her own plan, still intact, still moving, one certification program closer than it had been 6 months ago. She thought about what she had told Callum. Tired and done are different things. Come Sunday, she said. I'll make dinner. It won't be anything like Sidecar Good, he said. I've had enough of rooms that are trying to impress people. He came on Sunday. She made pasta with a sauce her mother used to make, the kind that required more patience than technique, and Daniel, who had insisted on being there despite Wren's explicit instructions to the contrary, shook Callum's hand and spent approximately 4 minutes deciding what he thought before announcing, with the delivery of someone who understood he was being surveyed in return, "Wren doesn't cook for people she doesn't care about." "Daniel," Wren said. "It's pasta from scratch," Daniel said. "She made pasta from scratch." Callum looked at her. Something in his face shifted, not the carefully composed expression of a man managing a room, but something older and quieter, the look of someone who had arrived somewhere they hadn't known they were looking for. "I know," he said. "I appreciate it." She set a bowl in front of him. He didn't say anything about the apartment, the size of it, the crack in the kitchen ceiling, that she'd been meaning to report to the super since October. He ate the pasta and said it was the best thing he'd eaten in years, and she knew from his face that he meant it, and she thought, all right, not a certainty, not a resolution, just, all right, this is worth stating for. This particular uncertain ground, with its federal disclosures and its elevator problems and its pasta from scratch on a Sunday night with the snow coming down outside, this is ground that is real. She looked at this man, this genuinely complicated and quietly lonely man, and felt the very specific sensation of a decision that wasn't dramatic, that didn't announce itself. That arrived the way most true things arrive. Not like lightning, but like the moment you realize the room has been warm for a while and you've only just now noticed. She asked if he wanted more. He said yes. She gave him more.